like this is not the first time that I've played Greg Davis with the Fight Club. And once again, with a not so graceful fade out at the end there. Thank you, Apple. Greg Davis, Full Spectrum, number 5 from his record Blue 53 off Blue Tapes. Welcome, folks, once again to another Monday night edition of Group Critique Fight Club. And it's another monthly project presentation edition, which I'm incredibly stoked to be here in your works. Every month we got new guests, we got new projects, we got new comfort zones that we are pushing ourselves out of as participants. Unfortunately, I did not participate in this time around. Just too busy this time, but I am stoked to be hearing your stuff. Once again, shout outs to our support, our sponsors, our jefes at Tape Trade for holding us down and providing our audio infrastructure, our back end for lovely in browser, in app, and offline playback of your choice. Stop using WeTransfer. Stop using big data scraping, file sharing platforms, and use a small platform run by musicians who love musicians who want nothing but to uh, allow you to share files, share your work freely without the worry that it will be scraped for its data and thrown up into some slop bucket where an LLM of you is being created on Mars. I don't fucking know. Anyways, with us this month for the December 25 through January 26 monthly project, we got ourselves a legend, folks. I had to bring out the big guns when we're getting into soundscapes and we're getting into sound walks and processed field recordings, speculative field recordings, things of that nature. I'm very excited to introduce y'all to a new friend of mine. Some of the previous guests we've had are old friends of mine, and now I'm bringing in a new friend. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to our digital stage, all the way from Brisbane, all the way from tomorrow, from Tuesday, coming in from Tuesday, we got Lawrence English in the building. Lawrence,
Let me tell you, it's a beautiful day.
it's a
That's all I'm going to
beautiful day.
say. It's a beautiful day. The future is always golden. Don't
I'm
forget
looking
that, kids.
forward to it.
Yeah,
You heard it
might
here,
take a little
folks.
longer in some countries, but like we're getting close. It feels like there's gold on the horizon somewhere.
Man is a time traveler. Look at this here internet thing. We can connect. We can connect. It's a
To
beautiful,
tomorrow.
beautiful thing.
See, it
To
finally
tomorrow.
feels like with the future, the promise that was so real in the 1980s and 90s for the internet is real. This is what it looks like.
This is
It
what
looks
it
exactly
is.
like, yeah, it looks
Like I
exactly
said, we
like
got
everything
a
else.
open-ended, open source music school in which we can talk across oceans in real time, across days, traveling through
Across
time.
time. Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's a beautiful thing. Lawrence, how are you, man?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me. It's a
Thank you,
pleasure to
thank
be
you,
here.
thank you for coming. So, just to fill you in if you weren't aware of what this whole shebang is. Normally, we meet twice a week, and folks are bringing in just works in progress, pieces that they're working on in their home studios or wherever, of their own personal projects. But once a month, I prompt the community to all work on a single project as if this was a formal electroacoustic or otherwise composition seminar. And so the last few months, I've been bringing in some guests of some high esteem. We had Maria Chavez for our experimental DJing project. Last month, we had Joshua Eustace, Telefon Tel Aviv, coming in for the speculative film scoring project, which was just in time to be a promo for the Marty Supreme score that he did all the orchestration on. It was
Yeah.
total coincidence. I'm like, oh, you actually have something huge that we can plug for this, you know?
Hmm.
So for this month, I'm sure you had at least taken a gander at our prompt being a speculative sound walk, a virtual sound walk, and I truly could not think of anybody in my mutuals, anybody else in my mutuals on social media who I really want to bring in more than you. You are the founder of Room 40, an imprint that's almost 30 years. What year did that start?
What, 26? Just gone 26.
Happy birthday, Room 40,
Thanks.
26 years old. It's a Zoomer. It's an elderly Gen Z label. And so this imprint, which is obviously you have released your own works on it, and countless others, including some of my former students, Sadie Powers, big, helped them out with that one. And I was like, just shoot Lawrence an email, man. Like, no harm if he doesn't get back
Totally.
to you. And it was just like amazing. I was kvetching, I'm sorry, I was kvelling, as we say in Yiddish, which is just like stoked as hell to see the Sadie's release on that.
Sadie's
So
awesome. And it's a
yes,
beautiful record.
I know. Oh, I know. I was there. I was there at the beginning. Um, I would love for you to just, for those that might be new to your work and to Room 40, to give us, I mean, I don't want to say elevator, elevator spiel here, but I mean, like, if you could describe your compositional body and I guess the ethos of the work that you curate,
Mm,
in a brief synopsis,
sure.
if you will, as a way to segue into much deeper topics.
Well, I mean, do you want it for Room 40 as well? Or just
We'll
me?
start with you, and then
Okay.
addendum. We'll add the label.
I mean, I would say that my work for it's like they're at parallel, it's like a delta, right? So there's this stream, which
Yeah.
I'm hopefully tapped into somewhere up in a deep mountain. And
Yes.
as it kind of comes down towards the surface, excuse me, there is this splitting apart that happens. Like the input is the same. Like I'm I love ideas. I love being interested in the world. I like being curious. I like being surprised. All the things that everyone should be all the time. And surprised by kind of incidental things that are not that maybe invite to be overlooked or over just underappreciated. Something as simple as like I can just overshare. I've been super interested in sodium vapor lamps,
All right.
which are the lamps that, and it has a practical application. So in LA, like I spent a lot of time in LA the last sort of 15 years. Yeah, about sort of 8 years ago, they switched over the lighting in the city from these sodium vapor lamps, which are the kind of like
Right.
soft, warm lamps, to these cheaper LED lamps.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, completely transformed the landscape with one very simple kind of shift, because even something as simple as like shadow or the color of the light completely alters the, not just aesthetically, but also like in practical ways.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm fascinated by that stuff. Like I spent a month in Japan and Hong Kong looking at, I mean, Hong Kong, I was looking at, which was terrible because there was obviously a very large fire, which had nothing to do with the bamboo scaffolding. But I
Yes.
was really
True.
fascinated by bamboo scaffolding. And I
Yeah.
wanted to document it because it's about to be outlawed by the government.
Right. Right.
Um, and this was before the fires. I mean, the fires were absolutely to do with bad uh, greed and bad practice
Right.
from the builders. They
Right.
use styrofoam and
Not the ancient practice of bamboo scaffolding in building in Hong
totally.
Kong.
I mean,
Yeah.
like you
Yeah.
try and have, I don't know if anyone's tried to burn bamboo recently, but it takes a
Yeah.
lot of effort.
Right.
Really does.
Right.
Um, but it was amazing to kind of go there and see, like, in really practical ways, like the functionality of that thing. And I'm interested in like how you can take those ideas and convert them to something that has obviously nothing to do with scaffolding.
Right.
But I'm working on a new record at the moment, and a large part of it is being drawn out of these experiences of looking at things like aerial cables in Japan or scaffolding in Hong Kong.
Hmm.
The things that in some respects come to characterize our understanding somewhere. So there's this big torrent of stuff coming down, and then it basically hits towards the ocean, and like it breaks out into these little pathways, which are sometimes incredibly focused. Like, the field recording practice is something that I is always part of what I do. And at different times it's folded into some of the other, like the kind of more sound, like music, whatever you want to describe it as, practices, the
Right.
compositional work. But other times they've been really separate. Or
Mm.
sometimes they've interacted in ways that have nothing to do with the actual acoustic information, but more to do with the kind of dynamic information of something like a field recording.
Right, right.
Um,
Spatial dynamicism or light in like sonified in some way, like not necessarily literal field recordings, but interpreting a
so yeah,
visual, a
that as
landscape or
well.
something.
I mean, sometimes really direct, like the example I often use just because it's really easy to understand is the on that Wilderness of Mirrors record, which came out probably like 12 or 13 years ago, something like that.
Mm.
There was this, I used this very specific technique, which was basically like imprinting very dynamic field recordings into instruments. So I'd have an organ, let's say, it's just droning, but then I'd use like a kind of side chain or another kind of way of basically tracing out the sonic information of what was the recordings I used a lot of during that time were actually used on Viento, which is that kind of recording from windstorms in Antarctica and Patagonia. And the
Hmm.
Patagonian ones, particularly because they have these very kind of like industrial metallic hard hits,
Yeah.
which are easily 10 or 12 dB more than everything else underneath them. So you basically can imprint, if you like, the shape of that sound on this other sound. And
Right.
rather than getting a kind of held chord, I have a keyboard here. I'm just not just air keyboarding. I do actually have one right in front of me. Like just when you have the chance to kind of like make those two things form a dialogue, that textual experience of listening to the organ suddenly becomes something else.
Right.
And I think that's a really, for me, that's actually really important um, contemplation in the work. I want to try and find ways where the dialogue is I mean it's invitational, but it's also kind of obscured in a way. Like I want there to be an uncertainty, and the example I use for that is Kiri no Oto. That whole record was based around this idea of the an auditory transcription of the visual effect of fog, is how I described it.
Wow.
That's my business card summary.
That is
Um,
fantastic. That's
yeah,
fantastic.
I just wish I had one of them for every record. I mean, I don't know where that one came from, but I'm grateful.
No, that's absolutely beautiful. I'm imagining like rather than an LFO on a waveform, it's the, the inconsistent, imperfect, and sometimes chaotic waveform of like of a field recording, and depending
Mm,
on what, right? Because even the stillness of a windless evening somewhere has that imperfection and potential chaos from a like imprinting that as a let's say a waveform onto a more musical tone. You end up with the sort of inconsistent breathing of wind or lack thereof, or a car passing by, things that are much more, I guess you can analogize it to like riding the levels by hand, but in this case
mm.
you're letting the field recording be the vehicle for riding the levels and make it breathe more alive in a not necessarily most obvious way. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, I think it's also good because it allows you to kind of contemplate that idea of acoustic perspective. It depends where you want the focus to fall in the recording. And I mean, that's a really practical thing in terms of like how you approach an environmental recording, like that uh, idea that Peter Shendy speaks to so eloquently in the Listen book. Can one make a listening listen to? And if you can you transmit that listening as unique as it is? I mean, those two prompts were essentially my PhD, to be honest. Like,
Wow.
I absolutely 100% owe Peter Shandy, and I've written to him and said that. He's very
Wow.
gracious in his reply. Um,
Fantastic. Send me a
and
link. Send me a link to that afterwards so I could put that in the show notes as well. We need a bibliography for this.
yeah, it's a really still a fantastic text, and it's just such a simple like provocation that he puts forward. But for me, what was really important about it was that it kind of summarized how I think about field recording, in that it's not listening as this kind of holistic, all encompassing thing. It's a listening. So it's like recognizing that it's like your preoccupations, your interests in those moments that you're trying to like basically guide someone else through as you make that opportunity for something to be transmitted. And that relational listening, uh, you know, theory, I guess, that I put forward as part of that study was a way of recognizing, in using field recording as an example, there are always two horizons of audition. One of them is the kind of like the interior psychological, listening that we're taking on. So you're interested in the bird in the tree and you're trying to record the bird in the tree. So you're focused on the bird in the tree and that's your interest. And then at the same time, you have this second horizon of audition, which is this, if you like, the sort of prosthetic ear of the microphone, the kind of technologically uh, focused audition of the microphone. And you're pointing it at the bird in the tree, but it's also just absorbing what is around it at the same time because it's kind of almost like a democratic function to the way that it is approaching audition. So it's recording the highway behind you,
Right.
So at that
Right.
point, when you get home, you nervously stick the SD card in the computer and you're all jittery and like, I can't wait to hear this recording. And then you put it on and like basically it's the best industrial album you never wanted to make. Um,
I'm sure we've
like,
all had that experience where it's
hey,
just like, it's so beautiful and pristine nature. I can't wait to listen
yeah.
to this later. And it's just something else, you
Exactly.
know?
And that's where there's no relation between those things. But if you can kind of, the essence of this relational listening is basically you want to bring those two horizons of audition into relation with each other. And the
Yeah.
further you can cross them over, the more successful, at least the opportunity for the listeners listening to be transmitted is. That was really the premise of it. And I think there is I mean, I'm really happy for people to disagree with it, but I do think there's a value in recognizing that it's not this sort of absolute pursuit, and that the subjectivity of practice that exists in field recording as a kind of creative pursuit, if we want to include it as part of the creative canon of sound arts,
Sure.
and not just have it completely tethered to a 20th century ethnographic, which
Right.
I think is highly problematic history,
Sure.
um, then I think you have to recognize there's a tension then between that subjectivity, which is our way of approaching the world, but then also the kind of objectivist, materialist implications of something like technology as a means of transmitting that. And I think there's a really interesting tension there that actually spills out into lots of other things around music, not just field recording, but field recording is such an eloquent practice to kind of use it as a template to start the dialogue.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and it reminds me when you're saying materialist though, and it's literally just wrote an essay on the field recording field trip workshop that I hosted out here in Hudson Valley and how like if I were an acoustic ecologist, like you said, like if I was like thinking and strictly up through R. Murray Schafer 20th century ecology terms, then like the day is ruined because there's
Mm,
trains and traffic and like the pristine ecology of the Hudson, the beautiful thing that we're looking at, is not what we're hearing, even when we stick the mic right there. There's so much
yeah,
more happening here. And it's so this acknowledgement as artists potentially that there is the material reality around us, whether we want to call it noise pollution. I mean, I like to think like beauty's in the ear of the beholder, like turn
mm,
lemons into lemonade here. Like, sure, there's this train nearby and like sure
love
we
a
can,
train.
I love a train and but it's like what is the final what are we trying to do with this here as artists? No one here is trying to be is saying I am a scientist. First and foremost, we are artists. So it's like you could view this as man, my nature recording is ruined, or like you said, like this the best industrial recording you've ever heard. Like what can we do to turn those lemons into lemonade as artists that like you said like does this tether it to the music side or sound art side or science ecological documentation question, and it
Mm,
still feels like a heated discussion depending on who you talk to. And I mean, not to naysay the nature preservation ecological side of this. Obviously, noise
yeah,
pollution, it would be great if we could all live in, just bird song, pristine bird song all the time in our cities and places like that. But I don't know, like we're in the 21st century. I feel like
well,
as artists, we gotta like just like you said, like you're finding this beauty in the wires, the electrical wires hanging above an apartment building. Like we're missing the potentially missing the forest for the trees as listeners, right?
I think it's a huge question though, like, and it's an interesting one if you think about it through that lens of like the industrial side of humanity's creation. I mean, I had this really uh a very focused experience of this recently. So I have this, I've been recording highways, not a lot, but like every year, highways in LA, in Japan, partly because I realized that sound world will be gone in probably 25 years, maybe slightly slower in some countries. But
Mm.
and the reason for that change is because obviously electric vehicles completely transform. I mean, obviously there's still the tire sound,
Yeah, but it
but
is
the
different.
actual dynamism and the characterization of the individuated vehicles moving together as a kind of collective mass is really changed. And the experience I had, I've had a very big gap from solo performance. In fact, I haven't performed a solo electronics show since 2018. Like I
Damn.
had a really big gap. And
But you got a big collab coming up, right? We got with
well, I
or it
I'm
just
going
happened.
this I'm going to perform. We're going to do a tour with Masami Merzbow
Murs bow.
in a couple of weeks. So I mean
Sorry,
well
got a name
it's
drop.
yeah, it's really a trial by fire for the return to performance. I don't know why
Beautiful.
I decided it, but I think I just need to set myself a deadline to get back on the horse.
Beautiful.
And I love spending time with Masami, so it's a pleasure to do it. But you know, it was really interesting. I went to Shenzhen, to Nanchang, which is like just on the border with Hong Kong. It's the kind of the sort of biggest city closest to the mainland in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And in mainland China, there's obviously been a lot of changes. I hadn't been to Shenzhen for about well, actually 20 years. So like when I'd arrived there 20 years before, there was no city. I arrived 20 years later, there was an enormous city. Now there is this
Right.
like megalopolis.
Right.
But what is really interesting is that country has entirely embraced electric vehicles. So I
That's
stood on
right.
this corner and all these cars and bikes were going past and it was super quiet and I could hear the birds and I could hear people talking and I could hear people eating in restaurants and I was like, this is it. This is the
Yeah.
change.
Right.
That and it was just so in some respects like exhilarating, but also really sobering that like parts of the world are already there and that you know, not everything needs to be documented. I'm not some sort of like strange, I mean, I partly am obsessive, but like, you know, in a positive way, a positive way.
Yes.
Like we don't need to capture that, but there is something to be said about the disappearance of certain environments. Like there was that great book about Victorian soundscapes and the kind of speculative understanding of what that environment was like acoustically, because
Mm.
we have no documentation of it in the same way that the recordings we have of a lot of the physical spaces we live in now are attached to other media. So their purpose and their service is different.
Right.
And I
Right.
think there's you know, certainly in the last 20 years, there'll be a lot more incidental documentation of places and spaces and people and things that will be really valuable in the
Yeah.
future because we can begin to composite things that are otherwise vanishing right in front of us. You know,
This
they're
is
becoming inaudible.
this is inspiring to me because I've always complained my entire life that like the hum follows me. I've never not lived like 2 blocks away from not like a full like freeway. I'm from the East Coast, so we don't even have California freeways like
Yeah,
that wide. You
yeah.
know what I mean? That only happens west of the Mississippi, really. But still like the hum is a inescapable thing. And you know,
Mm.
I just read a review of one of Kamaru's recent stuff and describing him as a master of the hum. And I'm like,
Aha.
interesting. What you're describing here is that we gotta like the only way out is through, but potentially it's
Always.
also like you never know how much you're gonna miss it till it's gone, right? You know, so it's
Totally.
like
And maybe it doesn't disappear. It's like there's this fantastic story, which honestly, I'm a little disappointed I didn't get to properly have this dialogue with Alan Lamb, but there was this great text that he wrote, like, I'm guessing it's maybe 30 years ago, which is about this thing, the hum, that he
yeah,
experienced out in the desert. And it's
interesting.
like this, he described as a kind of like low frequency presence that just carried, and if you didn't pay attention to it, you wouldn't know it was there. But when you leant towards it, it suddenly filled up your whole sphere of understanding.
Yeah.
And there are places in the world where that is definitely like audibly present all of the time. Like there's that amazing desert in China that has like a kind of it's like a singing
The
desert.
singing sand. Yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah. And I'm sure parts of Western Australia where Alan
Oh
was
yeah.
recording was so, I mean, there would have been activity. I know for me, the she oak tree here the has a very particular timbre when wind blows through. It's like a low B flat kind of thing.
Man,
And
we are so nerdy. We're getting into types of Scytherism right now. Like
hey,
this is
that's where it's got to
oh
be.
man, this is where we this is where else are you gonna get this?
Yeah, it's otaku only. The double O, like
Yes.
big O,
Yes.
and then O. But yeah, it's really it's kind of joyous to be completely obsessed with those things, and that's what I appreciate about someone's work like Alan. And it's such a shame that he's gone because the work was just, I think, has only just started to really come back into focus again.
Yeah.
And there's and he's a good example. There is so much that wasn't public, that maybe will remain invisible or inaudible now. Um, and that's a shame. And
Yeah.
I mean, I hope that, part of the this kind of incidental practice I'm talking about now is actually able to be used in the future as a means of kind of like constructing uh, a sort of audio vision of what the
Right.
world has been.
And I think that's
Uh,
it's fantastic. And you had brought up like the speculative soundscape texts on Victorian England and stuff because there's no obvious recorded audio documentation of that. But this we are living in a time in which everything is over documented, whether it be a
mm,
sound focused documentation or more likely a different medium that includes an audio component to it. But like thinking about in 50 years, 100 years from now, when America is balkanized or whatever the fuck, and thinking about what California gas guzzler sound in the like peak post 9/11 Hummer SUV era when you might have been in LA, thinking about this exact thing at its peak of loudness. Will will there be more sound artists who romanticize this potential, not just speculation but then like referencing your work and other works to use as a longing, almost ontological longing, for what they never experienced, right? Because at this day and age, we're moving towards electric vehicles. It's a net positive, I would say, in various
mm,
degrees. But like the audio, the sound pollution side of things is always the afterthought in relation to a lot
oh,
of these things,
totally.
just the sound in general, even the hum that's audible. Like you had mentioned the hum in the desert, which I know is has been written about, but I'm talking about the obvious one by the highway nearby as a nuisance. But like in thinking about it as an artist, right? Thinking about our material reality as artists, it's like nothing should be off the canvas potentially, or at least off the color palette as far as like verboten material. You know what I mean?
Mm,
And I think it's just a fascinating sort of world that you've found yourself in for decades. It's inspiring to me as an artist since going through the whole grad school thingamabob. But hopefully for those participating as well who might not have even been fully aware of your work before me throwing a bunch of examples at them. And I had shout out to, I already said it to you privately, but I'll say it on the record. Whiteout by Lawrence English last year, right? Or is it 24?
yeah, it was last
It
year.
was
Yeah.
last year. I have Antarctica tatted on my arm. Talk about romanticized speculative soundscape. I've never been there. I can only speculate. But as you informed me, apparently there's an artist residency that you can apply for. So who knows, y'all? I'll leave it to the chat as a vote. Are we sending Max to Antarctica to field record for
Yes,
4 months in the
you should
darkness?
go. Go like you can go and have your the thing experience, you know?
Yes, no, I was
And
literally
and
gonna
and
say I
and
have
the
to.
the thing is field recording. That's what's
That's
really
right.
weird. It's just like a morphic sort of sound that moves around.
That's what Carpenter was really getting at here. It's not this amorphous
Well,
monster. The monster
the
is
thing too is coming. So let's hope it's just all about field recording.
that's exactly right.
Kurt Russell like
So
this for like 3 hours. That's the whole film. It's like, wow, that's incredible. So minimal.
So speaking of speculative and potentially horrifying soundscapes, both based in reality and potentially not based in reality, we have prompted our participants of Group Critique Fight Club with a text score in relation to utilizing found sounds rather than their own field recordings to create a speculative sound walk in the sense that we're not just planting a microphone somewhere, but we're moving through a space, whether by foot or by vehicle or by air or however we want to imagine it. I just want to read the prompt one more time on the record if anyone's listening in later, but also just so to refresh your memory as well, Lawrence. So, using the power of Studio Magic, you are to create a virtual speculative sound walk using only found sounds that you have found on the internet and not your own field recordings. For those unfamiliar, a sound walk is a physical walk through a specific listening space, often aided by original recorded music or musical or sonic arts material played back in ear. Since this is a virtual sound walk, you are to create this speculative listening space entirely in the box in the DAW, and since it's made entirely through found sound, this speculative listening space doesn't necessarily need to exist in our literal physical world. So take us on a walk through this speculative virtual listening environment and utilize the production and processing tools of your DAW of choice to make it as immersive an experience as possible using only found sounds you get online. Utilize resources such as freesound.org or other libraries of your choosing to gather materials and reference the field recording compositions of composers such as Anya Lockwood, Francisco Lopez, and this guy, Lawrence Larry. Um, oh, Larry English. That's your DJ name. Um,
Wow. Just you wait.
just you wait.
I have a theory about this, which I can go into later if anyone does want to hear about that.
I mean, by all means, before we start, tell
Well, I
us.
I think like if I was going to have a kind of like look, honestly, Lawrence English, fine name, works fine. In France, heavily problematic, for example. You know, the French and
Yes.
the English don't exactly have the most tender relationship. So as soon as I arrive for a concert in France, I often feel that I have to indicate very strongly that in fact we're suffering under the colonial rule still. We're not particularly interested in the UK, and I'm in fact Australian, so I'm with you,
That's
you know,
right.
French
That's
comrades.
right. You are in
So
the
I figure what I
Commonwealth.
could do is have like in different countries, like in France it would be Laurent Foncé, in
Yes.
Italy Lorenzo Italiano,
Oh my
in
goodness.
Germany like Lorenz Deutsch. I just take the country name and replace it with a thing. So this is my theory. So in America it's tough though because it's really like Larry is such an American
Dude.
reading of the name. So I
DJ
guess it would
DJ
be,
DJ Larry Americano. Let's fucking go, bro.
ooh, that sounds, but that, I mean, that sounds like I could, you know, get into trouble and maybe I need, anyway, it's something to think about. It's something to think about. I think
I
and
love it.
I invite versions.
Yes.
Feel free to
Feel free to
throw
give
them in
some
there. Yeah.
Larry Murica. That was a good
Oh, yeah,
one. Someone
Murica.
fucking
Yeah, well, that way I
Murica would be
wouldn't get
good.
deported. So, yeah. Anyway,
Jesus, incredible. Oh my God. This is so good. This is where else are y'all gonna have these conversations, party people?
exactly.
This is what it's all about. So I am going, we have with us, we have 6 submissions. We did have a seventh, but the link was private. So I don't know if I'll be able if they're gonna unlock it in time because I know they're in a different time zone. But I'm gonna read through the descriptors that folks have given alongside. This first piece is from Jesse, who's here in the chat with us now. Shout outs to Jesse.
Hi,
They have
Jesse.
written to us. My submission for this month project title Absorbed. All the sounds are from freesound.org. This project is definitely outside of my wheelhouse, and I didn't have as much time to commit as I'd like. No disclaimers, no disclaimers. In an attempt to keep my understanding of this assignment, I tried to make the sound walk more natural and cohesive rather than leading into the more familiar concrete collage, excluding the ending. Okay, so we have a surprise at the end. The biggest challenge for me was likely the trial and error of selecting the right recordings. I also found it difficult to balance between over and underworking this piece. Interesting. This is good because I feel like the same problem occurs when you are going out and doing a whole bulk of field recordings, that trial and error of selection. It's not like all 12 hours that you gathered are going to make it into an
Thank God.
EP, you know? It's a crazy process. So whether it's through an online sound library or your own library, I feel like the difficulty doesn't necessarily get like lowered either way. It's a beautiful problem to have. All right, so we're gonna listen to it. I'll share my sound with you. It should be on, and then we'll talk about it. And feel free, if you have notes you want to give, you could speak directly to Jesse, whether he's listening live. You don't have to use me as the vessel for feedback. You can talk to the people directly. It's democratized. All right, here we go. Absorbed. Right.
Can I
Fantastic
just point out
words.
a very nice through line to Greg Davis
That's right. That's
with the
right.
harmonic filtering?
That's
I don't,
absolutely.
just his mind reading out there.
Yo, that's a fantastic point. That's a fantastic point. And yes, I mean this is we talked about this a lot in Fight Club about whether we're making soundscape compositions or not.
Mm.
The question of like what video game map does your music relate to, or where do you imagine this taking place? And then the question of, are elements of your piece diegetic versus non-diegetic? Are some of these things meant to be sound design or field recordings as location sound, meant to literally evoke a physical or literal space rather than sampled concrete items that could be assembled in any which way? Comparing that to the non-diegetic, maybe more literal music, or more like clearly processed and abstracted beyond one physical realm. And this actually, through that harmonic resonance, the Greg Davis effect, is sort of like, feels like we're dovetailing between two zones, going from the real to the surreal. If we were to view this in a potential paired to the visual components that are evoked by people talking, walking through a tunnel, we're hearing the glass kind of kicked along the walls, and I don't know, coming along to a crowd, and then suddenly that filters into a harmonic drone as if we're, you know, leaving the physical realm and entering somewhere else. I don't know if you had thought about this from like a visual perspective while here, imagining where we are, or trying to lock in strictly on a sonic. What do you think?
It's the transition from the sacred to the profane,
Mm-hmm.
or the
Mm-hmm.
reverse, as the
Mm.
case might be.
I was thinking the reverse, right? The
Yeah,
people are
yeah,
profane.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's always interesting, and like there are. I'm interested in the ambiguity that exists between diegetic and non-diegetic sound, and things like I always. It's a classic thing to go to, but I still listen to a lot of it and enjoy how it makes me feel, like like the Burial records.
Of
Still,
course. Oh man,
the that kind of
everybody
interplay.
here knows that's all I'm trying to, is like anti-dawn, like describing here the
Ah,
burial, you know what I mean? You
it's
feel me on that, Lawrence.
yes, absolutely. And I do because it's they have a dual function. And sometimes the duality of the function is to do with listenership. I think, anyway, this is my just to clarify my personal take.
Sure.
Like I think, they can operate in both spaces, and depending on, if you like, how deep you are into a place or a thing or a situation, they take on different meaning. So
Yeah.
I'm I am like I think this is a beautiful piece, by the way, Jesse. Well done. But like I think there's a really interesting thing about, for me, the things that came out of that was this idea of dimension, and also this idea of space. And again, that kind of speaks to the suggestive quality of sound in terms of building. Like you said, this idea of kicking glass along the walls. I wasn't thinking that,
Mm,
but I was thinking another thing to do with the dropping objects, because of a situation I'd recorded in, and I was in
right.
that place,
Right.
thinking about the way that the sound moved around in the space, and how the walls began to talk to each other because of that, because of
Mm,
the scale and the dimension of the environment that it was happening in.
mm,
And I think as well, the thing that I started to dwell on as the piece continued was, when does an event stop? Which I think is a really interesting question for field recording, because, like, obviously, in some respects, you have a choice as an editor as to when things are completed, but you also don't, because the world is this giant chaotic mess, and you're
right.
just there for those moments. So sometimes things stop when you don't want them to, and in that process of stopping, either a really, if for each of us is different, but either there's a really great opportunity that's presented there, or it's a crisis point.
Right.
And then if it's a crisis point, then how do you avert that crisis compositionally? And I think following that particularly that first sort of like 30 or 40 seconds of Jesse's piece, you have this kind of very, if you like, linear experience of like walking, and then the door opens to this other thing. I like the kind of like directness of it.
Yeah.
But if by chance you didn't want that walking to stop and that's where it ends, like how do you address that?
Right.
Like, how are you finding the next place? And or are you finding next place? Is that just it? It was like 50 seconds of walking and that's the piece.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I
Uh,
mean, and it's even more interesting when like these aren't our recordings, like
mm,
this is someone else's documented chaos that we have that much more control over crafting and looping and sculpting if we want in the DAW. And it brings up the question that Jesse was saying of, underproduction or overproduction when it comes to
mm,
this type of work, right? And they had written in the chat, wasn't not sure the best way on mixing and EQing, but they were using an exciter. um Part of me was thinking like the immersion oftentimes comes through like the emulated stereo image, and to me
mm.
like to find a way to make the imperfection and the chaos and the movement. If we were to be walking through a tunnel, it's not a singular left and right, but potentially I'm moving my head left and right, I'm looking up, I'm looking down, like there's inconsistencies of human behavior that maybe would be something to think about as far as if we wanted to evoke through production uh, another element beyond just the plugins that we're using to create a more heightened experience.
Mm.
And then obviously the spatial audio is a heated topic amongst many of my professional mix and mastering friends who work in more pop oriented industries of production, because I feel like it's meant for people like us, but that's not a selling point to
No,
Spotify and Apple, is to be
yeah.
listening to our abstract electroacoustic soundscape compositions. Let this be the lead, what we lead off with. It feels like it's wasted technology on Sabrina Carpenter and Chapel Roan. No offense to my Sabrina heads out there. But but it brings up this question, right? Of like to spatialize through the tools that we have even in stereo, or to like let it be, most artificially centralized or positioned in one area.
It's a really big question, I have to say. I mean, and I can say for me, a huge one in terms of parts of my interest in the practice and practice itself, because I do think there is the role of the mind's ear, I think, is downplayed. And I think we
Wow.
reduce that. And I think that's a problem, honestly. Like I feel like the mind's ear is actually one of the most important places that we don't really talk about and or cultivate as listeners.
This is
And
this is someone write this down. I mean, I'm recording this right now, but this is the beginning of the book right here, Lawrence.
yeah, well, I do think there is something to be said for it, because I think we have um it's like we have a tendency to try and pull in other, let's call them technologies, to do the heavy lifting for us.
Hmm.
And I understand that, like that's kind of how humanity is operated ad infinitum. But to actually spend some time recognizing that listenership is not like a right, but it's a privilege, and then what that privilege actually entails, like to recognize that the composite elements that go into that privilege of listenership.
Hmm.
One of those is certainly this idea of the mind's ear and like cultivating the mind's ear. So, do you literally need the physical spatialization of a sound to be very deeply inside a place? And
Hmm.
I would say probably no. I think you can have a different experience in that thing. And maybe it's like to do with the space that your listenership is happening in as well. I think there are lots of, factors that sort of contribute to the conversation. But this idea that somehow if you have more, it's better. It's a very, I mean, I feel it's a very late capital United States mentality, that the serving is bigger, so the
Yes.
satisfaction is more. When actually sometimes what I want is the I either want Ma, I want the space in between to be bigger so that I can be not forced, but invited to find the beauty of the ambiguity of that in between space. I
Yes.
love that. If I had to summarize my life, that's kind of it, right?
Yes, well, I'm a huge fan of Ma. Those that don't know the Japanese aesthetic term for negative space,
Mm-hmm.
which can be described in much of ancient and Shintoist inspired Japanese aesthetic beyond music. But invoked, I did an interview with Tamio Shireishi, the saxophonist in graduate school, and his talking about his Soho subway performances at 2 a.m. on an empty platform, playing his dog whistle, like shrillest alto sax improvisations, how it's a conversation with positive and negative space and, natural reverberation, industrial reverberation of the tunnel is that sort of glue between ma and whatever the opposite of ma is in Japanese. But it's a fascinating term here. I just want to mention, Jesse wrote in the chat, he wrote, for myself, I pictured myself walking deeper into public space and then eventually disappearing into myself. So that is the trajectory that we're
Which
hearing.
I
It's
think is absolutely there.
Yes, I agree. It's disappearing into the mind's eye, starting with the mind's ear, starting with starting with the physical ear and then entering the mind's ear or something. I don't know. This
Mm.
is beautiful. All right. Thank you, Jesse. And I know we can gab on forever, but I want to get to our other five submissions and then not hold you for a million years as much as I want to. Um, all right, we have Breath Play with Garbage In and Garbage Out, the radio edit. I love that. Breathplay writes to us, this is a sound walk of the heat death of the universe. I call it a radio edit as a little bit tongue in cheek, but I consider it to be a synthesized field recording of a science fantasy space representing the end of time, i.e., the endings of 2001, A Space Odyssey, Interstellar, Outer Wilds, etc., which is, I know Breathplay has told me to play that game, and I still have not played Outer Wilds yet. Um, the internet source material is a loopback rip of Lana Del Rey's Born to Die playing at YouTube's lowest resolution. Wow. Yo, this is not how we expect as far as our sourcing materials go. Okay. The full EP drops at the same at the drops first at the same time at the same tape trade link after the stream. Fantastic. So this is part of something larger, and I'll link you to that as well, Lawrence. All right. Garbage in, garbage out, radio edit from Breath Play. Let's go. All right. Give it up for breath play. I got questions about pulse, and maybe breath play can answer it for us, but I'll inform you, Lawrence. Breath play is a dub and minimal techno and deconstructed club project. They've done many other things under different names, but this project in particular, under the breath play name, is more focused specifically in experimental club music, and that was I couldn't escape tempo in
Mm.
this piece for obvious reasons. Now it obviously has a again this question, this gray area of diegetic or non-diegetic or somewhere in between, and knowing that this is speculative sci-fi soundscape, in particular, that evokes all sorts of potential other, mechanical industrial sound that could be involved in this. But I'm curious, from the artist, then your response, Lawrence, as far as like the uh, are we gravitating towards Pulse because it's a vehicle of working alongside more straightforwardly pulse oriented
Mm.
rhythmic work, or are we using this as this, let's say, repetition and minimalism, as a sort of a point of meditation or a point of like degradation, like a loop that continues to eat itself to some degree, because we were hearing that here. I'm curious your thoughts on that, Lawrence.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that kind of got me straight away was that I'd like, okay, like you say, pulse, but the idea of the pulsar, because
Mm,
in some respects they become this beacon of life and death through time, from times that are so far away we can't even perceive what they were.
mm,
And the fact that we're still receiving that information now. So I think that's a
right.
really kind of nice thing. And it also ties into like ideas of Morse code and about transmission and that kind of sense of uh, it's almost like the passage of time thing, which I think from that speculative reading is I'm all in. I,
Yeah.
I totally get it.
Yeah.
The thing that I thought was interesting, or the thing that I kind of came to partway through the piece was I started to, in some respects, filter out the pulse and listen to what was left after that. And there were these kind of variations in that sort of uh, shortwave radio, white noise, kind of
Mm,
decayed atmosphere. It's almost like they're the nebulous clouds around the dying pulsar kind of thing. And
right.
yet maybe the pulsar's light is kind of giving them some sort of proportion, just to give you a visual guide here.
Yeah. A
Um,
beacon.
but yeah, exactly. But I think there's always an interesting relationship between attack and decay. And I mean, I make this joke from time to time, but I am still and was then a terrible drummer. That was my first instrument. But in some respects, the reason that I wanted to move away from the drums, apart from my horrendous lack of skill, uh, was that decay is so much of what I'm interested in. And the drums are, I mean, cymbals aside,
Right.
the drums are, and maybe concert-based drums, they are not a zone of decay. They're a zone
Mm,
of attack.
right.
And that I absolutely respect people when I hear people like John Mueller or Tony Bach or someone that is able to find the complex complex rhythmic decay that's possible with that. I could never get there. So when I hear someone do that, I'm like, yes, that is like a thing that I categorically want to endorse and listen to. But for me, the space that comes after it, like with this piece, you have these markers, but there's all of this other material that sits there, and eventually it almost becomes a process of having to negate the the incursion, negate the dynamic information, and it becomes like a proper listening exercise in that you like are trying to reach in. And I actually find this a lot with field recording, like when I'm actually trying to find the proportion of something that I want to record, like waves. The Pacific Ocean has a very particular character, and depending on where you situate yourself, obviously the experience of those waves is entirely different. The frequency characteristics of it, the kind of even the spatial capacity of the ocean is really different by how you position yourself. And I often find myself, I did a project a few years ago at a place about an hour south from here, and most of it was me just moving back and forth across sort of 50 meters in different kinds of environments, like rocky shores or beaches or whatever the case might be, trying to find this thing that I could hear in my mind's ear when I was doing this, preparation for the recording. But then the recording wouldn't bear it because the
Mm,
microphone wasn't the relation was totally out.
right.
And I think that process of having to eliminate or filter out some of the material that is you're faced with in the moment and find the position that you need to be in to get to that thing that is closer to what it is that you're actually listening to. That tension is for me a massive part of the pleasure of field recording because it doesn't happen very often.
Right.
I mean, when it
The
does, it's like,
dichotomy potentially, and
oh,
even left and right, complete different yin and yang.
yeah. And also that it's something to do with depth. I think depth maybe isn't the right word, but the amount that you can and I use this word a lot, this idea of leaning in, like the more that you can lean into those things, I think can be really, it's such a powerful place to be,
Mm,
because it recognizes the totality of listenership and the challenge of it. Uh, and also, honestly, for me, the satisfaction of it.
yeah.
So I think I found that piece interesting because I was drawn to these after sounds, after images, how after acoustic images, however you want to describe them. And I tried to focus more and more. And obviously, in that last 30 seconds, the piece switches somehow to prioritizing that
Right,
experience,
right.
which I thought
Yeah.
was interesting.
Yeah. No, see, this is that good ear you got. The for the nine out of 10 listeners are focusing in on the attack. You are a decay man, you know? Like I really think that's beautiful. Breath Play has written to us to let us know a little bit more. They wrote, so it is at 122 BPM, and the EP I mentioned includes a version with 909s.
Oh,
Interesting.
wow,
Okay, so
nice.
there we go. However, the chiming pulse in this case is a diegetic sound for the purpose of this sound walk. And they wrote, to me, it is an artifact of some far future entropic process that is happening both in your head and in space, or in the space, which is both extremely confined and yet it is all that is left. And then they had written in response to what you just wrote, yes, proportion and spatial capacity were heavily on my mind because I wanted to have this illogical mutating acoustic space, which is, by the way, we're in outer space in this case. So, like, the idea of sound to begin with is entirely has to be internal because it doesn't, unless there's oxygen way out there somewhere, we're not hearing anything. You know, they
Mm,
could put some contact mics on it and gather the vibrations, but it's a fascinating, this mutating acoustic space. It's not even acoustic. It might be entirely within our floating man, like when Hal ejected us in 2001 and we're just floating infinitely until we die. It could be entirely inside our helmet, could be in our head. But at the same time, it's like that, like Breathplay wrote, extremely confined, but also all that is left is all encompassing. You know,
mm.
I'm loving this. I'm loving this because there's also lore. There's also lore which I just enjoy to imagine storytelling, even in its most simplest sort of factors of this. But the usage of a chiming pulse as diegetic sound here, it does ground us in like, are we staring out through something? Is this something that we're hearing the beacon, we're drifting towards? I don't know. This is what I love about soundscape composition and sound walks in particular is that the motion is implied. We're either going
Mm.
towards something, or in the case it kind of dithers away. Maybe we've fallen down the black hole. I don't know.
Retrograde orbits, here we come.
Yes. Amazing stuff. Thank you, Breath Play. Wise words from Lawrence here. We gotta we're gonna I should be just trans I should have used the auto transcribe so I can send you your own bars here because you're speaking poetry, Lawrence. All right, we have TH Nordberg with Sunday in the Park with George up next, and they written something for us on the Discord. Found Sound Walk piece. I cheated and recorded 1 2 second sound. Canceled. Throw it away. All other sounds recorded by other people and uploaded to YouTube and freesound.org. I love that that's all we get. And now we have to guess which
Where's
one.
that 2 seconds?
Is that 2 seconds? I want to know. All right, here we go. Sunday in the Park with George.
Not popular opinion and makes things true. What a terrible world this would be if that was right. Think about Germany in the 1940s. Maybe a majority of them thought what they were doing was right. But we all know that's wrong. We all know that
Jesus Christ, bro. And then it just ends. Oh my God. T.H. Nordberg, Sunday in the Park with George. I mean,
Great title.
great title.
Doesn't necessarily align with where you think it's going to go. That's the beauty of it.
No, it does not. And I mean, it's obviously, and I don't think this is the only socio-political topical piece we're going to hear this evening. But you know, I mean, first of all, kudos to Nordberg for putting something together that using found sounds entirely, because this is quite believable as far as the trajectory of a recorded protest goes. I was I'm out of the city right now, but when I was living in Puerto Rico, I wrote an essay and did a sound walk on the 2019 anti-government protests that eventually led to the ouster of the governor at the time, and talking about the human, the very human, like you want to know what a place is about, like the types of people who live in a certain place. You want to hear their personalities. It's like without any inhibition. There's very rare you will be able to find that in out in public, but in a, you know, a protest, there are people express themselves in peaceful protests. People express themselves in ways that you didn't know they had it in them. You know, even just raising their voice can be such a an act of liberation for a lot of people who otherwise would do not have that, you know, sort of option. Um, but it's also, again, the flip side of that is the violence and the darkness, the, you know, the imposition, the encroaching violence. In this case, getting closer and closer, and suddenly just, you know, stops right here. So it's obviously speaking towards something that's happening right now. All of these things could have been recorded today in various parts of the United States to start, you know, if not other parts of the world as well. But the concept of creating something from scratch using these found sounds to compose a an environment that is not only believable but is telling a story here. I mean, there was so many different characters in this that I wanted, I felt like I was getting to know, and then they were gone, as if we were just, you know, another face in this crowd that eventually panics, you know. It's just a one great example here of just like the utilization of sound in order to create political art, you know. And I'm not saying protest song, but protest sound, quite literally, in this case. It could be more evocative, it could be more disturbing than watching the footage of this, you know. I think that it's that we're tapping into something here that's, you know, more potentially more visceral, because I feel like we're desensitized often to the imagery of this stuff, less so the sound. You know, I am very sensitive to hearing these things.
Yeah, it's a beautiful piece, and it's funny. I mean, for me, being outside, like it's distinctly American.
Mm-hmm.
Everything about that is distinctly American, down to the pacing of the protest, the horns, the sirens. Everything about it is like it's almost like a caricature in a
Yeah,
way. And
yeah.
I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean like you really captured that essence of what I think contemporary protest is about there. It's interesting about, I think it must have been in 2019. I did this like I have a practice as a like a gallery, like a fine artist, or however you want to describe it, like work that's in the gallery.
Mm-hmm.
I did this exhibition called Rhythm of Protest, which was mostly, it had a little bit of sound, it was mostly visual materials. And one of them was these three 1 meter long panels, which basically charted the acoustic history of protest
Wow.
from the late 60s through to 2019. And it was kind of like spectrographs, essentially, these like cut out sections of protest in different parts of the world. And it's really amazing to look at the last 15 years where you see this significant dynamic uptick, particularly from North America, which the use of stun grenades, with the use of the LRAD. And in fact, the LRAD is the kind of end of this
Right. That has to be the
artwork
natural the inevitable conclusion of this,
in
right?
a way, because it becomes this, you really see the kind of, if you like, the reduction in the human scale of protest in
Right.
terms of uh, the way that it is managed or dealt with. You know, before you can see obviously like there's sirens, or maybe there's like in the early, it's like 2000, early 2000s, there's kind of introduction of more sort of stun grenade and those kind of very sharp dynamic events. But then there becomes this kind of like Mersbow wall,
Yeah.
you know, that hits at the end. And it's
Right.
really interesting to look at this piece kind of does that in a way, like it's about the kind of joy of being together, and particularly the kind of Spanish moment in there with everyone sort of
Mm-hmm.
chanting together, and it's people laughing, and the, like you say, that kind of communal pleasure of being together and sharing a point of disagreement and
Yeah.
wanting to seek a better something.
Yeah.
And then this kind of like concluding part, which obviously I think for me, certainly just thinking about that approach and research with the exhibition, is about the reduction of the humanness and the humanity of collective engagement.
Yeah, and how it
And
erases. It's meant to, because they brought out the LREDs in Puerto Rico. I wasn't there for that, for the end
mm,
when it turned into an actual riot by nightfall. I was there for the peaceful, bring your family and
mm,
pots and pans, cacerolazo, everybody like turning drums out of everything. Very
yeah,
Puerto Rican. That's why it was like the joyous act sounds of resistance can be quite musical in person and
mm,
lacking inhibition. But like you said, like this encroachment eventually will lead to the like the like complete just let's depopulate the zone as quickly as possible. What better way to do that? Stun grenades don't actually do that. There are ways to resist, to deflect. You could put on a mask. There are things to do that. And LRAD, by the end of this is some of the most powerful artillery.
mm,
Not literal, but sonic artillery that will guarantee uh just erase the human activity from an area, and it's we didn't hear that here, obviously, but this is
thankfully.
all of your yes, thankfully your work was reminding me much of Lawrence Abu, the guy who does
Oh,
earshot.
so ever happened. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And who's fantastic, line between researcher and fine artist here.
Mm,
But I believe it was the Serbian protests that they had done a spectrograph visualization sonification of the LRAD attack that was happening at the peaceful protests there. And it's true. It's like there's life and then zilch,
yeah.
like wall. Harsh Vomir, not Merzbow, Vomir,
Yeah.
like just
Yeah.
zero dynamicism, just 100% zeros to one,
Mm,
and it's hard to put that in a visual analogy in this context. It feels like it's an enigma, the LRAD, in relation to its usage in protests and resistance and its guarantee of erasing people, not just from a recording, but from a zone. Um,
mm,
and I don't know, it's just making me think about like you said, like this history of of loudness in it's a war on loudness in the
yes. It's the actual
protests.
loudness wars.
The actual loudness wars are happening out in the streets, and like you said,
Mm,
like as the tech has gotten more militarized in local police forces, the louder these things become,
mm,
and the less we're able to make out the faces in the crowd, the people, the camaraderie of it all, because it's just like desensitized, like just purely just or oversensitized, like just overstimulate, just like all of a sudden just disorient, we didn't get there yet, but I feel like this was like dramatically cut as a way, as if like the only possible thing that happens next in this case
is
would
this
be
thing.
would be that,
Yeah.
you know
It's true. I mean, as well, I think for us, obviously, uh, every country is different, and I think you folks have faced a particularly difficult pathway with something like protest.
yeah.
But I watched recently, and I think about this every year because I wrote an essay about it a while ago. Um, that film Warfare, which I think is one of those A24 films, and there is this great section where they use this term show of force, which is basically where they get, like, I assume they're growlers, the planes to fly over super low and basically
Mhm.
make this enormous thing. Where I live here, I'm about 2 kilometers from the city center, and every September, we have this flyover of one of these F-18 Super Hornets. And like literally I can look from because they literally do the turn over my house. So I can stand in my front yard and look at the pilot's face as he flies over, and they do it like 3 or 4 times, like a warm up, and then for the actual show. And it's really interesting. Like, it's such an extreme sense of privilege in being able to look at that, and because it's always shock and awe, right?
Right.
Like for us, really, it's awe because, like, okay, it is okay, it's shocking, but it's also like, wow, what a incredibly loud sound for anyone that's actually been on the receiving end of that in a real world. Like, we have a lot of migrants here, a lot of people that have come from Iraq,
Yeah.
and other parts of the world. That is just like instant PTSD trigger.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
it's
Sound
such
is
an
so embedded in trauma.
totally, and because it's inescapable, I think that's the power of it. And that's what makes the LRAD so powerful, is like you don't have earlids, like you just have the capacity to be, it's like you are open and there's no way to close it.
Yeah.
And I
It's
think
so
that
vulnerable.
obviously you can reduce it or whatever, but like even the reduction is not enough. And I think that's a really that question of the human scale, the kind of human sensory scale, and how you can subvert that, has become such a uh, like it's the hot topic for the weaponization of sound and other kinds of things like microwave weapons, whatever you want to describe. Like,
Yeah.
it's really looking at what are the inherent weaknesses of the body, and how can you, in a maximal way, use them against the body itself.
Man, we're getting on we're fully in Jacques Attali territory, like we're fully in
Yeah,
just like it's not just music that is the canary in the coal mine, but like literal like audio technology in relation to the
totally.
military industrial complex, both for the sake of building literal weapons in like the LRAD case, but also just you cannot extract the tech's origin, but in any case of tech from military, in at least in America,
Yeah.
and in Europe too. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. This like you don't have earlids. That's a great way of putting it. It's just like finding the universal weakness, and bastardizing something that like we it, like should represent humanity, should represent joy. Like I would love for sound, this whole big thing we're talking about here, to be like a universally positive sense.
Zone of joy. Zone of
Exactly, a
joy.
zone of joy. Oh my
Yeah.
god. I wish, bro. I'm so naive. I wish. It's just this is what these are the conversations that come up when even when we are creating this in a speculative sense, because it's just not far off from the reality
Hey,
by any stretch.
all good speculative fiction is just reality yet to be.
Yes, and that's why it's a bad time to be a speculative sci-fi writer because they keep accelerating
Yeah,
the
exactly.
absurdity.
I gotta have another idea. Jesus,
Jesus.
give me a
Oh, I know.
break.
I know. It's bad. It's bad. All right. We got something from Bryson coming in now. Bryson, one of our long time participants who has been for many years focusing his work on speculative soundscapes for game design. He's a game composer and sound designer, as well as a electroacoustic composer. But I he had studied privately with me, and as a huge fan of Lustmord and a lot of dark ambient stuff, and I'm like, we have to funnel this into media that we can leverage our darkness to evoke emotion, space in a literal sense. And game audio, man, I mean, it's interactive media, let's say, and not just game audio.
Hmm.
It's a new frontier. Talk about like a good usage of Atmos of field recordings, for the sake of interactive media. I mean, Anti-Dawn by Burial, he said that was a speculative open world RPG. That was how he described it. And I was like, oh my God, blowing my mind. It's beautiful. So Bryson wrote to us, this is a piece I did with a single unedited field recording that is being sent through a ton of effects processing. See that American excess, that American channel strip. The goal was to turn the original recording of a suburban neighborhood into something unrecognizable. In this case, a dark and foreboding forest. All right, giving themselves a challenge here. Bryson with Untitled. Let's go. Hell yeah. Kareem wrote in the chat, so much lovely mulch in the low end. And I love that because it's talk about the hum, right? But there's spikes to it. It's not a smooth hum. There's something in there harmonically that feels like textured, sharp in some ways, while still, enveloping us in the warmth.
Cambril dirt.
Yes, I love that. What I think this is great about this that Bryson clued us in on is that they're utilizing sounds of a suburban neighborhood in order to evoke the sounds of a dark forest. And like I had mentioned, Bryson's interest in game audio. And to me, it's like what video game evokes the like normalcy, suburbia in the reality realm and then like flips the script into darkness and decrepit. Like what better than like Silent Hill or something like that,
Mm.
which is the go-to. I mean, Akira Yamaoka, just like the goat composer, sound design. Talk about that blurring the lines between diegetic and non-diegetic audio for media. He's really one of the like revolutionary, at least in the early 2000s with this stuff. But to me, it's what I like about this is that there is a familiarity. No, like some of these sounds, whether it be like evocative of crickets or a single car alarm kind of just like, going off on its own, but like the abstraction of it as if like we're we're in the what I mean, I don't watch Stranger Things, but what do they call it? Like the upside down. Like it's like
Yeah.
the alternate darker version of this or whatever they called it in the Insidious movies. But like in Silent Hill, it's like the fog has brought you to the other world, and this is like to me, there's hints of familiarity. There's hints of this feeling like we're home or on a quiet street or something, and that we're seeking that out in what's otherwise like, the other world. The dark forest is the current reality, but there's hints of what's underneath, if we if we beat this boss or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're hearing any of that familiarity or you're entirely in the darkness. Where are you with this?
Well, actually, the funny thing was, and this is probably some PTSD relationship to field recording. I heard the dog, and like
Ah,
it's the acoustic shadow, because no matter how much you process a dog's voice, somehow it still sounds like a wolf.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and that's when I heard that, I was like, definitely in the suburbs, thinking of every time I've made a recording at a creek or whatever, and somewhere like 25 kilometers away, there's someone's dog that is just barking. Not even like a lot, just enough that you're gonna have to go back and edit that thing if you want
Yes,
it to be
yes,
actually not rooted in that sort of sense of a place and time.
yes.
So I like that tension, but I think as well, like it's for me, it's a question of uh, proportion and perspective.
Mm,
It's where you, if you like, where you settle the frequency manipulation that reveals a certain other quality of a place. Like if you bring up the highs and you really accentuate that kind of, if you like, the insectivorous activity zone, and you give that more light, and at the same time you maybe take out the middle and then bring up this very low, like the hum part,
hmm.
but like the kind of, it's a suburban hum is different to an inner city
Sure,
hum.
sure.
There's
Yeah,
that somehow very distant breath of a city somewhere else,
yeah.
but there is this kind of like uh constant, almost like comfortable pressure, let's say, of suburbia. And that is acoustic, but it's also like psychological, I guess.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's the
and like when you,
familiarity I'm talking about. Even the dog, it's
yeah,
like, life. You
exactly,
know?
yeah. But life as we know it,
Yeah, as we're
that's what's
we're
kind of,
comfortable with. Yeah.
yeah. So I think there is like a certain shaping that you can do there, very in some respects very easily, that radicalize the experience in that you are not instantly just comfortable, but the things that you think that you still know, or the things that you do know, are suddenly much more evident than they were before. And you're like, well, that doesn't feel right. And
Yeah.
just internally, there is this kind of like it's like you're setting the stage for something to occur. I mean, whether or not you choose to activate that is obviously a compositional choice, but I think it's interesting for game design what made, I mean, even like going all the way back to Doom, what kind of gave those environments such a great um, setting was that sense of whatever you want to call it, sound design, sound pressure that
Hmm.
existed in it. I mean, the one for me, and this is a filmic reference, but I think it is so absolutely elegant in terms of a sound design is I mean it's also a timely film to watch always because Bruno Gans is amazing in it. The Downfall,
Oh,
the last days
classic.
of Hitler in the bunker.
Classic.
I saw that in the cinema, and what really I came, I mean, apart from Bruno Gans being just like
Yeah.
absolutely freaking brilliant, um, I came out of this with this amazing sense of the the subliminal power of sound to shape pressure and shape internal pressure. And what really gets me is if you watch that film, if you ever have a chance to see it in the cinema, you should, because at the beginning of the film, the Russians are clearly a long way away, and artillery it becomes this sort of talking point through the film. But the basic din of artillery is this very Moog filtered kind of club down the street feeling that
Right.
eventually
Through the
becomes,
wall.
yeah, becomes far more present and becomes like the stun grenades. It's the sharp attacking presence.
Yeah.
That is so eloquently done in that film. It's like a work of patience. And I think for me, I love patient work. I love field recordings that are patient and that don't need to rush me there. Like I'm okay to sit. I'm actually okay to even get a little bit distracted and
Yeah.
come back.
Yeah.
But maybe I don't share the same interest as the person that's making the work, but
Right.
I I love when you can, if you're there and if you can commit to it, you can be patient with that person
Yeah. Yeah.
and you can feel the gentle pulling that often is actually field recording. It's not like sometimes it's a radical thing. It's really like effervescent and lively, but a lot of the time it's just this tiny little detail that you've attached yourself to it's the one grain of being sand being pulled down the beach as the wave goes back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and that can be completely never seen or heard, or it can be the absolute focus. And I love when people allow you the time and um, it's like almost like an act of generosity to be like, we're just going to be with this thing and it's going to be enough. I think that question of enough is something I think about a lot with field recording, actually, also with improvisation.
Sure.
Like when you watch a couple of years ago, I had in the period of like 12 months, I had Mike Cooper down here who's like 84, and then David Toop was the
Yeah.
following year. And they both did these quite radical sets, performances. And what really got me was whatever they have in front of them, that was enough. It's the same for Akio Suzuki. There's like that generation, I think, and maybe it's about being mature enough to recognize you don't always need to throw more in there. And like honestly, I'm the worst offender of this. I'm finishing a new record at the moment. There's a piece that's like 110 layers deep. Like, can you ever actually hear layer 90? Probably not. But when you take it out, it's like, oh, I can feel a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it. But sometimes what I just am amazed, you like give someone a pen and they can just find the thing that is that's it. And that's enough. Just those gestures.
Yeah.
And I think that tension for me is present in something like field recording practice.
Absolutely.
Um, and a piece like this kind of toys with that. It
Yeah.
bends the expectation around it.
I wish I didn't have to limit people to 5 minutes because the patience, I'm right there with you on the patience.
Mm,
I don't want to rush these things, especially in this type of tape music composition and this type of thing that utilizes field recordings and that I actually enjoy, like you said, the act of being, allowing yourself to be distracted at some point and then to tune back in as if you are
mm.
there. I
Yeah.
mean, how would you experience that even while field recording? Right? We often will get distracted in the act itself, especially if we don't necessarily have headphones on and we are capturing something. But just for the sake of capturing it to do something with it later, not
Mm.
necessarily deep listening then and there in the moment. Which we, no fault for people that want to just get something real quick and move on, but it feels natural when you're sitting with something for long enough to zone in and out, and
Mm.
not necessarily feel the obligation to be constantly demanding your attention with this type of work,
Well, it's an interesting thing. I have had a very big, not it's not really a shift, but it's like a reacquaintance with the practice of recording, which is to do with not to be realistic about the circumstances I find myself in, particularly while traveling, and also to recognize the how to describe it, like that sometimes my listening to the place is actually the whole point, and the thing that is recorded maybe is something else.
mm,
And I've actually been using uh this, I don't know where it is, this cassette recorder a
nice.
lot. This is my favorite. The great, it's the 450, I'm pretty sure, the TCM 450. This is a 200 dB, but what it has is like speed control, two lots of speed control. So it has like a tape recording control and then like a pitch control. It's the
Wow.
premium. I'm so sad that when they stopped making this, and this one's like some of it's broken now because I've
Oh,
used it too much. But like I have developed this habit of recording a lot of material onto cassette, straight onto cassette. And the thing that I love about it is it completely relieves the pressure, which I sometimes feel very frustrated by when I'm traveling and trying to record something, of actually capturing the thing that I'm listening to. So I can stand there and listen to this thing and be like, that sounds beautiful. I'm so attached to it. And I'm making the recording at the same time. I get it home. The cassette's a whole other thing.
right,
And
right.
like that, it's also another thing to appreciate later, for better or for worse. Like you can be like, well, that totally, erodes the experience I had listened to, or it's like this is an amazing other thing, and now I can use it. And actually, I've used a lot of cassette recordings in the last couple of uh, records, which honestly I haven't really been using field recordings. But there is a quality in this which is so not anything to do with my audition, that
Mm,
there's a liberation there somehow, that it becomes a different kind of a secondary listenership, if you like,
yeah,
to an experience.
yeah.
And I've actually found great value in that.
There you go, folks. It's not just about two points there. Enough. Always a good question to keep in the back of your head, especially when we're deeply afflicted with gear acquisition syndrome and
Mm.
things like that. And then on the other hand, like the like Kareem wrote in the chat here, like recording to listen, like the act of doing something to listen back later, and also the material in which not only you're recording, but what you're using to
Mm.
record. I have this little where is it? I got the little Zoom iPhone clip, the little
Oh
thing
yeah,
that attaches to the iPhone itself with a little windscreen on that. Um, and I, for the point and shoot real quick, I need to capture this while I'm out and about. It's
critical.
great, but it still has this like it has a gain stage built into it. It has a gain knob onto it, and it's like, and I'm not plugging in my headphones. I'm just quickly doing something on my phone. It always has a distinct different quality to it. I don't know if it's the digital quality, if I would describe it as that. Sometimes it's brighter, sometimes it's darker than I had heard it with the naked ear. But I'm jealous that I'm not able to get one of these two speed handheld tape recorders, because that
Look,
is
in North
Jesus.
America, you are gifted with eBay.
That's
May I
true.
just say that to you?
That's
In
true.
Australia, these things are, I mean, these are actually all from Japan. I bought
Yeah,
these
yeah,
when
yeah,
they
yeah.
announced I happened to be in Japan. I bought 7. The problem is they all have a similar
Oh
production error,
man,
which means they are now all dying at the same time.
that is
Um,
incredible. I love it.
but yeah, they
That's
are. I fully
fantastic.
recommend it. Just jump onto eBay, kids. It's all
Yes.
there waiting for you.
Yes. Fantastic. All right.
Bankruptcy awaits.
Exactly. Fuck enough. Keep buying more. Go.
Yeah, exactly. Capital will die otherwise, for
Woo,
God's
woo,
sake.
woo. Come on.
Yeah.
Be a member of the economy. All right. Participate. Participate. All right. We have two more. And this one I know is going to bring us back to the sociopolitics of the soundscape. And this is from our good friend Potvora, who is currently enlisted in Ukraine.
Uh-huh.
Active duty. He's been with us since prior to the war, has, only recently been brought up, and is in training now. And so his piece is relating to that. And so we're obviously being put into some very personal shoes here. He writes, this piece aims to depict the irreversible impact of war on how sound is perceived, encompassing both the psychological triggers and PTSD, as well as the permanent physical alterations like acoustic trauma and concussions resulting from blasts and similar events. All sounds, thankfully, are from Free Sound, so none of these are firsthand from him. But obviously, things that we can only sympathize with, you and I, and not empathize with on a personal level. But yeah, we got ahead of ourselves talking about sonic warfare and its the trauma in relation to sound. And this is Potvora's commentary on that as a composition. So let's see here. Wartime Sound Walk by Potvora. Let's go. Powerful, powerful stuff. Seriously. Shout outs to
Mm,
Potvora. I mean, the way that they described it, I was expecting more. I mean, there was obviously the initial uh sounds of wartime destruction, and particularly the one artillery shell and the the tinnitus, and the sounds of the car alarms and things like that. But that was really like only like a small fraction of the piece, and the majority of it focused on this afterwards. This big afterwards, and the internalized trauma, sort of evoked through sounds, and particularly like, I guess that was the car alarm itself that remained haunting us throughout, the processed alarm kind of coming in and out, even when we were back in nature and seemingly in a moment of peace and tranquility and beauty around us, and there's still this thing there haunting us. I said the word haunting. I meant it quite literally here. um it feels documentary, despite it being a composition meant to evoke real emotion and trauma. But it feels objective, in that like this is like a simulation
mm.
almost of this trauma evoked via sound itself. And it's something that like I feel is unique to warfare, or unique to militarism in particular, like the effects that it has, the associations that it puts on certain sounds, and how we perceive things audibly. It's and also like Pafra is like a fantastic producer when he's just making straightforward music here. So he produced the shit out of this too.
Mm.
That also is part of the realism here and why it's effective. This is a good case of not overproduction, but through to the end, effectively mixing this to for the sake of immersion. No.
It's interesting, like some of the most powerful writing about war, I think, is actually the writing that speaks to the boredom. And that's not exactly the
Mm,
right word for this piece, but like the fact that there are these large periods of nothing, and part of the pressure of warfare is the expectation of arrival.
right.
And there's a kind of, in really practical ways, like a tension and release, obviously, that happens there. But it's so, the fact that you know what can come creates this inherent expectation of what's coming. And I think when you look at even like there was a fantastic UN, I think it was the UNHCR that did the report about the use of drones in Afghanistan and in other countries in the Middle East.
Mm,
I think it's called Living Under Drones was the report. And a lot of it was talking about uh, the just the even the distance, or like you say, the haunting of those sounds, how much they affected the possibility for people to actually engage with their lived environment.
right.
So, even the thought that somewhere very distantly they might hear a drone, well, that would just stop people going outside at
Mm,
all, even though it's potentially nowhere near them, because you don't know whether you are going to be the unfortunate receiver of something from that drone, or in this case, from that artillery or missile or whatever the trajectory that we heard colliding in the space was. So I think it was a beautiful piece. And for such a short piece, again, like actually was able to hold that sense of tension
yeah.
and suggest the fullness of that experience in a very condensed kind of environment.
Absolutely. And I mean, yeah, I agree with the boredom and the anticipation uh involved in that. And obviously, like thinking of like All Quiet on the Western Front as kind of like classic example of that, of how it's like half of that book is like guys hanging out. Like
Yeah.
it's like very much like, and a pride in doing that. And then just, sheer chaos for the second half of that. But like, you know, that's coming.
Mm,
And the act of waiting, or the mundane sort of day to day before all of that happens, you know, is now tinged with this, not only when the pre anticipating the attack itself, but then afterwards, when we go back to the mundane, like you said, this association of things, even off far in the distance, or something that sounds somewhat like something that reminds you of this. It's this it doesn't leave necessarily. And I mean, you know, it's doesn't say much for me to just like be saying like, well, let's use that. What better way to, you know, confront trauma than by making art with it? You know, it doesn't mean much from my ass saying that, you know, in New York. But I mean, it is certainly, I would assume, like and you know, and Puffer is not on the chat with us now, but you know, the act of confronting much of this, and you know, choosing to be creative in describing this, you know, like he could have just done a less produced, more objective documentary of the mundanity meets chaos of warfare, but instead he, you know, he's giving us a an autobiography of sorts here that's heartbreaking, you know.
mm,
And I hate to just be like heartbreaking beautiful art that I am seeing from a voyeur, because we know this guy, you know.
mm,
It puts it in a much different perspective, but it's just it's once again like story sound is a a medium of narrative, of storytelling, of evoking emotion and space that we are still very sensitive to, compared to just footage of the war in Ukraine or in Gaza, or you know, ice raids and things like that. We've just like, we see we've become so numb to a lot of this stuff, but like sound immediately, from the voyeur's perspective, like it's like, oh shit, like this is really real, man, you know. And that's
mm,
how I kind of felt here, you know. It's like, and it's the why it's why it's heartbreaking on a personal level, you know, because we know this guy, you know.
mm.
But it's a beautiful piece. And I mean, I don't want I feel bad assigning this, and I didn't tell Papa to go make a war
Yeah.
piece, you know. I didn't say that.
Mm,
But I mean, like, I also feel bad that this is what's on his mind and what he wants to express, you know.
mm.
um it's you know, what can you say? You
Well,
know.
look, it opens the chance for a dialogue. I mean, that's for me the thing that is really powerful about just, I'd say, just generally art practice. Art is not going to solve the problems,
Yeah,
but what it is going to do is either help as a translation device, taking like quantitative ideas and giving them a qualitative framework, or it allows the possibility for a door to open that will facilitate some kind of communication
yeah,
and dialogue that sits, you know, perhaps in parallel with the work, but the work becomes the facilitator of that
right,
parallel possibility.
the vehicle for that
Exactly. And I
conversation.
think
Yeah,
that's super important to recognize in a piece like this, or the piece we heard before, looking at that kind of American protest situation. Like, yeah, they are heartbreaking and they are beautiful and they're great listening experiences in and of themselves, but everything else that sits ancillary to that and above and below it, they are also things that we can choose to engage with if
yeah,
we become interested. And it's that opportunity to become more invested that I think is really, like, particularly with sound, is very powerful.
yeah,
And it's why I think I'm still, honestly, part of the reason why I'm still so interested in it is because quite regularly I'm caught off guard by those very, in some respects, incidental experiences that really hold, there's some kernel, some seed in there that germinates in time.
yeah,
And it's really, it's profoundly special, actually.
yeah, yeah. It really is. And I mean, honored honored to have you know, somebody like Pafura be in this community for so long, and you know, wanting to share this shit with us, because I mean, like, yes, it's been the start of many conversations, and not just in literal politically charged uh sound soundscape compositions, but just in songwriting in its
Mm,
simplest form, right? It's still very much a vehicle of conversation, and in the very least to remind folks that the jingoism of nationalism and things like of that, it's these things tend to break away when we live under a certain shared experience or have a shared conversation via artwork. I mean, like, it's like talking to musicians, it's like knowing people on 6 continents for myself, and it like learning so much that I wouldn't have learned from their personal experiences via their music. I would not have had that, and I wouldn't have felt the same way if I read about it, or if I watched their social media, like, footage or whatever. It's another it's another layer of both expressing your lived experience, but also conveying it as an open door, like you said, to begin this conversation.
mm,
Powerful stuff that I'm assuming everybody here listening in is sensitive to this stuff, both, physically, like, this is, visceral stuff, but again, like, emotionally, uh
mm.
in tuned in to the weight of this sort of stuff. So thank you, Pafra, for being so vulnerable. This is very powerful stuff. All right, we're gonna end it on a little lighter note, I think. I don't know if Kareem has given us something dark or not. Um, okay, seemingly so. Kareem writes, glacial explorations, moving from imaginary wet worlds to literal ones. All found sounds from YouTube and freesound.org. A work in progress for sure. Have had no time to do any live automations with this one. Kareem wrote shrug emoji in relation to whether it's a darker piece or not. So, beauty's in the ear of the beholder. Let's find out. All right, here is Kareem with Call, and this will be our final piece for the evening. Yeah.
Nice end.
Really, really beautiful ending to this. I mean, this is giving true aquatic, uh, which is funny. Kareem just wrote in the chat that it's GoPro footage from inside a crab fishing cage that's been processed a bunch. Who is
Wow.
Lawrence? Maybe you can fill me in. Who's the sound artist that did the literal glacier geophone recordings? You know who I'm talking about?
That I mean, Yana Windram's done. There's quite a few
Quite
people
a
that have
few,
done.
yeah.
But there's that even that film that has a bunch of Swiss recordists that came out last year.
Hmm.
Uh, but there's quite a few. I mean, I'm pretty sure Doug Quinn's done some as well.
Right.
And
Right.
I know Chris Watson has.
Yeah,
So
Chris Watson. Yeah,
there's
yeah.
there's quite a few folks out there that have done. There was a really beautiful recording. Yoichi, I can't remember Yoichi's family name. Which is actually it's Yoichi Kamimura,
Mm,
who made these recordings in Hokkaido. I love that record
mm.
that he made. It's like some glacial, some I think like pack ice basically together.
Right, right.
Very wet sounding
Yes.
kind of recordings, but also that real sense of like you you can feel the living ice in them. Actually, Philip Samatzis has some beautiful recordings too that he made.
Mm,
Um, I think it was interesting the summer that I went to Antarctica. I went actually with the Argentinian military to Antarctica.
as one does.
Yes. And in that one summer, I was there with the Argentinians. Philip Samatzis was there with the Australian base. And Chris Watson went with Sir David Attenborough to McMurdo. So there's
Wow.
this suite of recordings that were made in that one
Wow.
summer
Oh
in
man.
2010.
Should have had a box
Yeah,
set
which is
album with that.
well, we were talking about doing something together with it, just because it is such an interesting situation and a kind of unusual situation.
Absolutely.
But yeah, we didn't really get anywhere. Um,
This is it's all fascinating stuff, and and Kareem had written here too that they're trying to imagine what one would hear at the water's surface in the middle of the Arctic Ocean. And I mean, that
Mm,
is an interesting, because I was literally thinking about submergence that slowly surfaces up, and ice to slush to water to air, these, the various degrees of oxygen, let's say,
mm,
the various forms of oxygen, physical and and gaseous, um the varying, frequency zones that we find ourselves in, and how one would capture sound in those various places. So because we had this deep sub bass geophonic, tectonic
mm.
occasionally,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's
Beautiful.
what reminded me of the glacier stuff, is like hearing this mile of ice croak slightly,
Mm,
is evocative across so many different frequencies. But the sub bass, that's God's subwoofer, and it feels like we're kind of surfacing away from the geophonic towards, a vibrational, and then eventually acoustic sort of
mm.
world. It felt like this process that we're hearing of just slowly surfacing in our submarine, in a world of ice.
Yeah, I liked that things were kind of creeping in. I mean, I am quite obsessed with this idea of the sort of promiscuity of sound, that things are
Mm,
uh, uh um um it's very porous and it's unpredictable and it's not linear, that there is always this. That's what I find so appealing about the idea of the, horizon of audition, is that it's this kind of dynamic, porous, three-dimensional horizon, not like the kind of linear one that we're used to with light.
mm.
And I think this piece kind of really taps into that. And in fact, I thought of the low pulse sounds as maybe like, well, that's a Arctic bearded seal going past, just letting out a pulse, you know?
That's right.
And
That's right.
yeah, so there's this kind of like nice poetic interplay, suggestive kind of quality that, and I think that's a really big from, you know, when we started talking before about the kind of history of like um R. Murray Schafer's work and the World Soundscape Project and that kind of like prioritization of the natural world, however we want to describe that. I mean, obviously that has flown into a really critical area of like bioacoustics and the kind of capacity now, particularly to take long form recordings and process those to get a kind of quantitative and in some respects qualitative read of an environment, the life of an environment. I think it's really interesting to recognize that for a lot of us as recordists, quite often we're not sure whether it's the croaking of the glacier or it's a bearded seal. And part of the pleasure is in actually doing the research to try and dive deep into that. I mean, I had a recording that I made in the Amazon in 2008, and I was like, this has got to be some kind of like mammal because of the way that it was calling. But I knew they didn't have gibbons there. It sounded like a gibbon, but it wasn't. It took me 12 years to identify it, and I only identified it because of that Birds of Venezuela CD or album that David Toop wrote the liner notes for.
Yeah,
And I listened
yeah.
to it again, and I was like, hey, that's my monkey from the Amazon. And then I worked out it was a horned screamer, which is this absolutely beautiful bird. And it was fantastic to have this moment of like, wow, I've finally solved it. Was also I was able to identify the barking piranhas in some of these recordings. I thought they were actually like mammals, but they weren't. They were barking fish. And it was like, oh, okay, now I totally, there's a whole other world that opens up there. And I
Yeah,
think that's such a special thing. And this piece kind of taps into that not always knowing, that's what keeps you going deeper.
yeah. I love it. It's the mystery of sound, you can't get this with your eyes. There's ambiguity, a beautiful ambiguity, and the choice of what to produce, what to compose versus what to kind of leave to its more natural sounds or whatever. Because even though there was processing involved here, right off the bat, I wasn't even though he said glacial, I was thinking floating in water. And
Mm,
lo and behold, it's a, it's a crab fishing cage floating in
mm,
water. And the various things that we're hearing rush up against us as we're just treading water or something like that. It's but where and what are we? You know, like
Mm,
what are we listening through? It's this is this is what makes it art. This is why we're artists. We're not ecologists. We're you know, art
absolutely.
art is a vehicle to talk about very serious things, whether it be science or sociopolitics. But at the end of the day, we still have to follow our aesthetic leanings here. And Kareem, he's coined the term of a new genre that he's working out called just wet music.
Uh-huh. Nice.
And it's not exactly what you think, but it taps into this question that I brought up at the beginning, that the uh the the which video game map does your music take place in? You know,
Sure.
it's something that I know Kareem is consciously thinking of, and it's part of the inspiration as to wanting to assign this prompt, you know, to get everybody sort of thinking about where their ears are gravitating towards, you know.
And
um
what they want to build for other people that encounter the work. I think that's
yes,
a huge part of it.
yes, this is
That's
should
actually
be.
one of the pleasures is the kind of world building exercise.
I love
You know,
that
it's the way it's
world
ways
building
of making and world
exercise.
building at the same time.
Oh my God. This is just like, just quote after quote after quote. This is, you're gonna have to auto transcribe this yourself, because you deserve to have this for your own writings later on to reference
I'm happy
yourself.
for everyone to take those terms and just go
Fair.
forth and propagate them.
You hear
They're out
that?
there.
You hear
Yeah,
that?
please,
Everybody
please go
getting
forward.
into the mind's ear. Everybody at Lawrence's behest, enter the mind's ear. Lawrence, thank you so much for
Total pleasure.
tuning into all this with
Congratulations
us.
to everyone as well. Beautiful pieces and
Beautiful,
very,
beautiful pieces.
yeah, very good at prompting, you know, a proper sense of interrogation and discussion. So kudos to everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lawrence. Thank you to our sponsors, Tape Trade, for helping us out in doing what we do. This recording will be available soon on the pod channel, and I will also link you, Lawrence, to the playlist here if you want to have access to the recordings on your own. And that goes for
Thank you.
everybody else. I hope everyone has a wonderful January. I am off to the EU tomorrow for a conference with Liz Pelly. Don't contact me. That's not true. I switched my T-Mobile to international for a week. Let's get into it.
Have a great trip. Enjoy
Thank
some,
you.
you know, proper Dutch potatoes.
Is that what it is? I was gonna say wooden
That-
shoes.
Oh, no, the look, they're pomfrets, the fries,
Oh, that's
chef's
true.
kiss.
That's
That's what
true.
the Dutch have. They don't
Uh,
have. I mean, it's a kitchen that I don't have a great that and white asparagus, two golden things that they've
all right.
provided.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good to know. I wouldn't have
a little
thought of the
bit
white
early for white
asparagus.
asparagus, but you never know. Someone might have some out of season stock for you.
Beautiful. I will make some requests. Thank you very much, Lawrence. Thanks all for participating, and hope everybody has a wonderful week. Take care, everybody. Bye
Adios.
bye.